Okay, guys, thank you for listening. This is actually a talk I've delivered for the first time at DevOps in Belgium. And back there was a keynote about embracing the Doomsday, embracing the imposter syndrome. And back then, I was standing in a cinema in front of roughly 200 people. That was very humbling and a bit intimidating. I'm not sure though if this intimate setting is a little bit more intimidating because now I'm talking to people who all know Keycloak really, really well. So I'm kind of having a bit of an imposter syndrome standing here right now. But anyways, I will be talking about I am Doomsday Prepper and how to survive the apocalypse with Keycloak. So I will take you on a bit of a journey. For that, let's take a small time travel back to the year 2020. We all know what happened back then. The coronavirus pretty much engulfed the whole world. That pretty little thing here. And for the first time in my life, I was actually facing doomsday prepper thoughts. I have two small kids at home, a wife, and I was thinking, okay, what happens if supply chains around the world collapse, if food gets scarce, if no more water is accessible to the people, medicine and healthcare, how do I provide that to my family, right? And shelter even, right? That is also something very fundamental to the humanity. And I couldn't have been more wrong. When I went to the store, the only thing I could not get anymore was toilet paper. So it, what did that teach me in the end is that you really need to think how to doomsday prep. And in our case, we will be thinking on how to doomsday prep our Keycloak instances and Keycloak configuration. So who am I? I'm Maik Kingma. I live in the Netherlands. I'm a senior software craftsman there, technical coach, speaker. You can find me LinkedIn, Twitter, or X now, I think, Medium. I write blogs on Keycloak every once in a while. And yeah, I've been in touch with Sebastian and Thomas quite a while now. We used to work for the same company called Centric. The Dutch branch split off, but anyways, there's still really good contacts. And I've prepared this little interactive session. You can take out your phone and scan this QR code and then actually answer this. I mean, at DevOps, this was more of a get to know thing here right now. I think that probably most of you could give this talk yourselves. But let's see. This should be live. So when you click an answer on this, yes. So I would probably see like 100% on I work with Keycloak on a daily basis. Nice. So there's 4 people in here now, 7. Okay, cool. I think we'll just head on because we all know that you guys are really good with Keycloak. And yeah, nice. Who wants to give this talk? Join me on stage. That'd be nice. Cool. Okay, thank you for joining. Okay, let's talk about Doomsday prepping Keycloak. I will skip these slides because I've at the DevOps conference, I gave like an introduction on what Keycloak is and what are the building blocks. I think that's lost time on you guys because you all know what Keycloak is and what it does. So let's get to the interesting part, right? There are different ways of configuring Keycloak, and this part I'm actually really interested in. Right, we can configure Keycloak using the admin UI, simply clicking configuration together. We can use the admin CLI, where we actually, on past projects, we used these enormous bash scripts for very complex configurations, you know. And then the really big downside of using this, we will get later into, it takes a lot of time. But why? We will check that out later. Configuration via JSON file imports. I think a lot of people do that, especially, I mean, we've also seen it today at the test containers. It's a really easy way, right? You export your configuration, you import it at a later stage. Really nice. So I would really like to know what you are using in your projects. How do you configure your Keycloak instance? Just give you a few seconds to answer this. other? I'd be really curious just to get some answers on what is other. Okay. REST API, okay. Okay, cool. So just as a reference, when I did this questionnaire at DevOps, 50% of the attendees used the admin UI, which was really scary. So I was really glad that they were all sitting there in this talk, and I could give them some insight on the approach that I was using at some of my customers in the past. So I will continue now. Thanks for joining. I will also skip this demo because we all know how the admin UI works, right? We've all seen it. You log in and then you click something together. Really cool. We've all been working with this. There are pros to using the admin UI. It's Keycloak built something really nice and intuitive. It's easy to use, and anyone with credentials can pretty much do it, as long as you had some very basic training on how to configure Keycloak. So there are also downsides to using the admin UI, which is anyone with credentials can configure it and can also mess up your configuration, right? I've heard that in lunch talks as well, where people said, like, oh yeah, and everybody can log into our sandbox, and then they mess up. I think that was yesterday at dinner, and then they mess up the configuration, and we need to figure out what went wrong. Well, release versioning with the admin UI is pretty much impossible. I actually 4 years ago started working at a customer project where we literally used the admin UI for configuring our production Keycloak, and release versioning or SEM versioning of these configurations happened in documents on Confluence. So we labeled them, okay, this document version 12.0. whatever. You need, as an operations manager, log into your production Keycloak instance. Click there. We attach screenshots. Click on that button. Configure that. Horrible. So we actually ran into the situation where we lost the complete database. Everything was gone. We didn't know how or what or whatever, and the latest backup policies also were not very well configured, and we had like a huge delta from the last backup to where we actually were. So we actually had to redeploy Keycloak and then figure out, okay, until which version did our latest backup go, and then check out, okay, now we need to do this, now we need to do that. It was a huge mess. So after that, we actually went into a meeting and said, okay, we need to Doomsday prep. This cannot happen again. How can we alter our deployment processes and also our strategy on recovering our Keycloak and reduce deployment time, recovery time, everything, right? Back then, well, partly was the admin UI was used, and then we also had these bash scripts that used the admin CLI. Problem with that, it was like 1,300 lines of admin CLI code, and every time, you know, the admin CLI spins up the JDK in the background, executes the statement, shuts it down. Same thing for the following statement. Our Keycloak deployment in the end took something around 30 to 40 minutes, depending if OpenShift had a good or a bad day. And that could also lead to other extensive problems. Okay, anyways, let's go on with this. Complex maintenance, I think we've covered that extensively. Testability is limited, so we actually had manual regression tests, acceptance tests, where we defined huge processes. Okay, is this client available? Is that client available? That authentication flow works or not? We were very limited in what we could do. So admin CLI, that is the second thing where we actually now get configuration automation, right? Version control is actually possible. You can submit them to any repository, these configuration scripts, and we can even have release versioning if we, in some sort, you know, package these things into an artifact and push them to an artifactory. Nice. Cons, at least if I see bash script, I mean, I'm not that big of a script kiddie, so I find that really hard to read. And especially if you have ever done that with the admin CLI and you want to reconfigure something that already exists, you first need to fetch the ID, then place it into a variable, add it to the following command, and it's just not pretty. And the more complex your configuration gets, the harder it gets to read and to follow. And we have, we've all been there. You switch projects, or some very knowledgeable person leaves the project, and then you're there with 2,500 lines of bash script, and you want to change something, be like, okay, where do I need to be now, right? So yeah, it's just complex, and you have really slow execution time if it gets into a really big configuration. JSON file. So this is more approachable, because Keycloak gives you this functionality where you can simply export your configuration, and it's really nice. And you can actually also just reproduce blocks. Like, for example, I want to add an extra user or something statically into my database, right? You just duplicate a JSON block, and then you alter some variables in there. Fine. We actually used it for integration test setups for quite a while, and it's really cool. And version control is possible, but yeah, version control is a nightmare. I mean, if probably anybody experienced that, if you have like a really, really big Keycloak configuration and you do the export, you get JSON. You can split them up for sure, but you can get JSON files of like 15,000, 20,000 lines, and then the order in these JSON files is not guaranteed. Or some developer has different spacing settings in his IDE, and then he commits something, and then the div shows like 15,000 lines of code, and it's just really complex. You have complex secret maintenance in the JSON files, which also, we're dependent on Keycloak actually with the export functionality. I mean, I don't think that they have changed a lot in there, but actually they could spit out the whole JSON in a completely different order, right? That is actually possible. So yeah, that is also something you need to keep in mind. Possible complications you could get when migrating to newer versions change. So these are all things that you need to keep in mind when using JSON file configurations. So keeping all that in mind, we're all happy developers, right? And I mean, those are problematic scenarios, but let's say we click all these things together and we have our configuration and we're all happy and we can ship new features. So what could possibly go wrong, right? And in fact, so many things can go wrong. So first of all, I would like to hear from you guys apocalyptic scenarios that you have faced in the past with your Keycloak instances. For example, data loss. That is something that we experienced. So we're really curious to hear difficulties that you have faced. And I'll give you a few seconds to do so. We'll see that popping up in the word cloud. Nice. Okay. Wrong environment, yeah. Nice. Okay, I still see people typing. So nobody has ever experienced like that the database got lost or something? Nothing? No? Okay. Anyway. Very good, very good. Lucky you. Hacking attempts. Rename the client ID. Okay. Cool. Oh, I see still somebody's typing. That's so long. That's Sebastian typing there. We'll wait for you. DDoS, nice. Okay, yeah. Okay. Secrets rotated. Okay, yeah. Cool. Let's go on. So there are so many things that can actually go wrong. I can just name a few where, configurations actually gone wrong, where we tested something in our acceptance environment, staging environments, and then, on on production, actually, the configuration that we figured would work didn't work for some reason, right? There are always some things that can go wrong. Deployments going wrong, that can always happen. I mean, we had these, as I said, right? We had these bash scripts that were running for 30, 40 minutes. And our I think we ran on an OpenShift cluster with Jenkins pipelines. And there was some threshold whenever you try to deploy something and then it's crossed that threshold, the pipeline would just time out, right? And then all the configuration scripts that we ran were like for nothing because they just, boom, went down and then it would roll back the deployment. And then we were somewhere stuck halfway and we had to figure out, okay, what happened now? And it was just a nightmare. And then big pitfall is knowledge. I already talked about it, right? That you have these situations where developers just move on to the next project, and they have implemented a huge part of your application in some dark corner of the code base, that nobody knew about, and then the person is gone, and the next one comes and be like, okay, and handovers, they're all not perfect all the time, right? So these are all things that we need to consider. And if that wasn't enough, there's also the situation where we say, okay, we changed something in the configuration and, there were not enough regression tests whatsoever. And we just changed this one small thing, but it broke all of production. Also definitely a case that can go wrong. And I mean, at least maybe I'm just the only unprofessional, but that happened to us as well, right? Where people could not log in any longer, something went wrong. So that is definitely a very important point. And then there are those guys. I got a call from a manager some Wednesday afternoon, I think it was, and they were like, we just had this hacking attempt on our Keycloak instance. We had some alerting when when a certain threshold of failed login attempts was crossed, right? And in the end, we had like 50,000 lines of log statements generated in 1.5 seconds, where some script kiddie from down in Africa launched like an automated attack against our Keycloak instance. And so the manager asked our team, did he get somewhere? And we were like, okay, how do we figure that one out? That would be really tough. I mean, usually Keycloak is very secure, and he tried everything from SQL injections to whatever, and it was really a not very sophisticated attack. Yet we had to figure out with 3 developers in more than a week's work, did he get somewhere, right? And the only thing this kid had to do was next weekend launch this same attack again, and then we would have to figure out again. So we were also in our Doomsday prepping meeting thinking about, okay, how can we prevent a team from wasting so much valuable time and effort into figuring out if something actually happened and somebody actually gained access. So yeah, this is us being very desperate on a weekend, figuring out if somebody hacked us. Okay, so we were thinking in this meeting on how can we reduce risk and enhance security? How can we reduce our recovery time? How can we reduce state delta during recovery? I will get to that in a minute, what is state delta for us actually meant, because we use a very unique approach to configuring different approach than a lot of projects to configuring our Keycloak. How can we enhance maintainability and testability? Okay, so enter the Keycloak Java Admin Client. We're actually using the Keycloak Java Admin Client for configuring our projects, for configuring our Keycloak instances, realms, clients, access control settings, authentication flows, apart from having all these custom providers in our Keycloak instance, also assigning them to the correct flows, protocol mappers for clients, anything we would actually have as Java code. Basically, what you need to do that is import these 3 dependencies as a starting point: the Keycloak Admin Client, Keycloak Core, and Keycloak Services. And then you can pretty much create a Keycloak client that will expose Java code to you that, in the end, simply calls the admin API of Keycloak. So let's talk briefly about the setup that we're using. I already discussed it with Alex during a short time. He found it quite curious. For us, it works really well. It's actually based, the whole idea is based on a blog post that Sebastian and Thomas wrote on a zero CVE approach of building a Keycloak Docker image. So we picked that up and extended it a bit by not only saying we can exclude or adapt some sort of dependencies, but also package custom stuff into our Docker image, being the Keycloak theme, for example. We currently build it with Keycloakify. We have a config jar where we have a custom Maven module where all the configuration code goes in, and we actually package the configuration code of that particular release into the Docker image. So the Keycloak server is always packaged together with the configuration that we need for that release. Obviously, the Keycloak code goes in there as the Keycloak distribution. Package any other services or libraries into that particular Docker image that you would need. For example, I think we've heard ByteBuddy or something in past projects. You know, anything that you would need for your particular Keycloak installation, we package into that custom Docker image. We push it to our Artifactory, and the unique setup for us in our project was that we externalized everything from Keycloak. There were no users stored in Keycloak, no passwords stored in Keycloak. There was only really configuration in Keycloak that would make the whole environment work. So for us, that meant that our Keycloak instance essentially became sort of stateless, meaning that in the occasion of a hacker trying to get into our system, the only thing, or post-mortem, post-incident, the only thing we would need to do, rotate our secrets, shut down Keycloak for a very brief amount of time, redeploy it, trigger the configuration, and we would be eventually at the same state we were in, just with completely different secrets. And then the only thing, you know, in terms of external clients maybe that would use our Keycloak instance, communicate the new secrets. You know, but that would be really a corner case of that we would actually need to do that. Like, for example, if we would have indicators that the admin password or something got compromised. So that for our setup, and there we found that there are a lot of pros in using the Keycloak Java Admin Client, which is, first of all, you get configuration automation. We get version control and collaboration, right? We could actually, it's just a simple Java project for us in the end, where we write configuration as Java code and developers could collaborate on that configuration. Whereas, for example, if you have all these JSON files, you know, it's really hard to collaborate on. We got packaging where we actually, you know, could package our configuration together with the configuration that the Keycloak version that the configuration belonged to, we could actually package together and put into our Artifactory. So we could actually retrace our steps, like, you know, for example, if we would need to roll back a deployment, we wouldn't have any troubles with that. And then obviously release versioning. And then there were more pros. We got code readability, we got testability, you know, where we actually could unit test our complete configuration, where you do not have that trouble of having to mock the entire Keycloak server, right? You would simply, you know, focus on the test classes, on the classes that you have in Java code and unit test them actually. You know, integration testing and even the test container testing. And I actually had a talk with Niko after his talk that, you know, we tried this approach and we really wanted to make this work, that, you know, you actually have this custom Docker image there which you can actually import into your test container. And the only thing that you would afterwards need to do is trigger that configuration script, and then you could actually have your test container with the entire configuration without having to import a JSON file. Yeah, no added complexity for bigger projects or bigger configurations, right? I mean, Java files, object-oriented, you can split them up as much as you want, and they get they remain maintainable. And another very big factor that we didn't even consider in the beginning is the reusability, right? So there are parts of your code that you can simply, you know, copy paste into the next setup, or where you actually need to, at a very recent customer, we implemented one Keycloak instance, and then we needed to migrate or in parallel develop a newer version. And you know, they wanted to let me think of the English word, like freeze. Yeah, that's one. They want to do a code freeze on that one repository, and in parallel, without even talking to each other, some other team used the same setup to actually build a newer version of Keycloak. And they were like, okay, how can we get this configuration? This will be a huge migration nightmare. Where I got into a meeting with them and actually said, well, no. The only thing you need to do is copy the Java code into that new instance and maybe figure out a few different parameters that you need to pass along. But then the whole configuration can actually be ported from one project to another. So reusability is really high in that approach. And then we came to a different, actually I got assigned to another project where we used the same approach, but they had another very peculiar use case, which gave us a bit of a headache, where we figured out there's this one case where you have static configuration as code, meaning you have this, or we called it this idempotent bootstrap configuration, where you simply say, I deploy my Keycloak, I trigger my configuration, and that's that. Until the next release, nothing will change. We are in full, as developers, we are in full control of the configuration of our Keycloak instance. But now, and it is versioned, it's stateless in a sense, right? And there are no deltas throughout from between one version release and the next version release. There's absolutely no configuration changes. But then we figured, sorry, and this is let's skip this. Then we figured out that there's a different case, and they actually had a requirement where we needed dynamic configuration. Dynamic configuration meaning that you have an initial bootstrap, and then some admins at a customer, for example, would have access to Keycloak via, for example, an API. Where if we don't want to expose the whole admin UI, they would have access to some sort of API we're exposing, some sort of configuration frontend where we limit the functionality very, very much. And they can add users or roles or, you know, anything we would like them to be able to do. And by that, after our version release, that being here, right, we actually get a state changes of some sort of admin where they add stuff and where we have no control over. So we somehow need to know, okay, what happened after the release and between some sort of apocalyptic incident where in the end we need to roll back to our initial version configuration and then be able to replay what these users did, right? So we've thought of a proof of concept, which is still work in progress, but which I really wanted to share with the community. And we are currently trying to event source Keycloak configuration, meaning that we deploy our Keycloak, we trigger the configuration, our static configuration that we have as Java code, and then within our API where we expose certain functionality, we actually use an event sourcing approach where any alteration to our configuration is stored in an event store and can be replayed at any time where we say, okay, between the moment where I deployed my static configuration and that some dynamic configuration took place and the scenario where we need to roll back to to that static moment in time, afterwards we can simply say, okay, until that moment, replay my event store with the configuration and actually reach the same state in the end that we're trying to achieve. So let me briefly demo this API, how it would look like. Let's go into Keycloak. Where's my Chrome? That's that actually. Okay. So basically what I have as a project is this one. Ooh, my IntelliJ is dead. Rainbow spinner, nice. Let me briefly restart that. Okay, the demo gods are not with me. Where is it there? Choop. Shh. Go away. Yes, no, I don't want to report this. Okay. Well, lucky for me, I'm on this new M3 processor that starts up IntelliJ in like around a second. Okay, some sort of error. Okay, anyways. Let's just make sure that this is all down. Okay, so my project, and I will briefly enter the presentation mode. My project actually consists in a very basic manner of it's just a simple Maven project that defines a lot of dependencies. And I have two components in here. One being the Keycloak component, where I register all my custom providers that I have, right? And this one is the Java configuration part, which is eventually packaged into a jar file and I placed it into the eventual Keycloak server target folder. This pretty much looks like this. I have a configuration application that creates a Keycloak client builder. This is the simple Keycloak Java Admin Client, where I eventually can register all my configurations I want to execute. In this case, I have an example configuration. The only thing that this example configuration does is actually triggering a realm configuration where I check, hey, does this realm already exist? If not, then create it, right? Let's build this. Let's see, 3, 4, 5. Where is my... No. Jesus Christ. Okay, never mind. CD projects. No. Man, let me... Okay, simple matter of packaging this. Running some we saw, like, see here, we had some unit tests. So we actually tested the whole configuration that it calls, for example, the RAM configuration with certain parameters that we're expecting. For example, is brute force detection enabled? Are other things enabled? Eventually, we're done. The only thing that we end up with, and I will show you that briefly, is a beautiful Keycloak jar file. And let's get this up. And I will enter the presentation mode again. Where is it? Choop. So let's see. That should be about it. Nope, not yet. Hip, hip. Come on, man. I swear this worked when I tested it like 5 minutes ago. What is it saying? Yeah. Oh, it took a while. Okay. Finish Java configuration without errors. It just took a while. So we actually started up our Keycloak environment, and as you can see, it already comes with our example realm that we've just created in our code base. Let me just briefly show you the other example. So what I also have running here is, and I, of course, because I restarted this, I need to restart this. I built a really small wrapper API that kind of like mimics the behavior of a reduced admin interface where we allow our clients to do some very limited operations on Keycloak. In this case, it's just a simple realms create command where I can pass in a data transfer object the name of the realm that I want to create, and then this API will actually call my Keycloak instance and create this realm for me. Meaning that in Postman, I call this endpoint realms create with an example2 realm, display name, send this, and it says 200 OK, created. And actually refreshing this should then show me the example2 realm. Great. So the basic idea is that within this wrapper API that we created, also event source this command into a database that I can replay it in the end. That is an ongoing implementation, which I would really like to demo. I'm preparing a session on that for the next conference, and where I would really like to demo the event sourcing. So thank you for your attention. If you have questions, go ahead. No.
Hello? Questions?
Such a conclusive presentation.
No, I really appreciate also that you mentioned the blog post. So it's really depends here, and it's getting better. Let's just summarize it like this.
Yes. Yes.
I have a question. Thanks for the great presentation. I think it's very inspiring. We can also have a chat later on because we do something similar with Terraform.
Yes.
But my question is, if you want to roll back, for example, or there are some backward compatible changes in the configuration, are you always deploying fresh Keycloak and apply your logic from scratch? Or do you have to maintain situations that, something was there and it's not there anymore? So I want to ask, how do you handle this?
Yeah, sure. So this is really, so let's first of all say this was worked out in a context that was not high availability. Like, I think his name was Dominic, who gave the presentation just now. We did not have the requirement of 100% zero downtime, for example. Like, if people could not log in for a minute, like, this is actually our deployment time of our Keycloak instance. We reduced it from 40 minutes to a minute in the end with this approach. And business found it acceptable, where they said, okay, if we face this scenario, which eventually we never faced in the end because we added some extra monitoring as well, which made it easier to analyze the log statements in the end. But for us, it would, since our Keycloak was stateless, right, the only thing that would get lost were the sessions. Meaning, if we would have done that in the end, wiping the database, redeploying our Keycloak, everything, the Liquid-based script gets executed from scratch, our configuration jar gets executed, which also imported all the secrets from a secret vault, which was really nice because we could actually predefine our client confidential secrets. Basically the only thing because we didn't keep users, we didn't keep passwords in Keycloak, nothing was in there except for IDP configuration, realm, client configuration, protocol mappers, and so on and so forth. Only thing that would get lost were the sessions. Does that answer your question?
There's one question from the internet. Are there any limitations with this Java client config regarding what you can do? Probably in Keycloak?
Since it's maintained by Keycloak and it exposes the complete admin API via this Java code, anything is accessible. The only thing I found a bit I've experienced as a struggle was figuring out the payloads that you needed to pass on, which were required, right? It's like a lot of trial and error. And the only way of knowing where you need to be, especially, basically the process is you log into the admin UI, you configure something, you figure out which endpoint is he calling, and then you go into the admin client code and look in the interfaces, like, okay, which function is it that corresponds to that endpoint, right? And that also gives you a pretty good idea of what the payload is you need to Oh, Jesus. He's quick. The payload is you need to configure in these calls.
Yeah, remember that too. So
Yeah.
sometimes it's really weird which calls are actually.
Yeah, and it's very
actually
counterintuitive. Also, I'm just trying to remember. I think it was something with composite client roles. I think the place was really counterintuitive. It did, you know, the endpoint that was called didn't really correspond to the admin function that was defined in the interface of Java. But anyways, you will figure. It's easy to figure out once you know that where you need to look.
Yeah. The internet also mentions Terraform. I think that's also something that is available from the audience or people.
Yeah, I would be
in the room
curious
are
to
using
discuss, by
Terraform.
the way, how you do testing with the Terraform
With
approach.
Terraform,
Yeah. Yes, thank
Happy
you.
to share. Nice.
Nice.
Yeah. If there are no more questions, I think we are done. Thank you.
Thank you.